Expedition 33, Clair Obscure, is one of the most transparent industry plants we've seen since Baldur's Gate 3. Okay, this is a game with no real momentum behind it, no real audience, and yet we're supposed to believe this is some grassroots independently produced title made by a handful of developers. Oh, just pay no attention to the fact that they signed a movie deal before the game was even out. Obviously, this game is not what it seems. It really gives me the same kind of vibes that something like Fez had, where it's not being talked about because it's genuinely like this organic, amazing RPG. It's talked about because the developers knew the right people and that they had some real financial backing from someone. Like with Baldur's Gate 3, it was due to Tencent owning the vast majority of Larian Studios. And that's a fact that a lot of people really downplay and try to ignore, that like actually it's independently owned by Sven and his wife, like, completely ignoring the fact that Sven is old as fuck and that the Tencent can swoop in and seize control of the entire thing whenever they want. So like again, like this, the entire cope behind this kind of thing, like it seems to have this vibe of just creating the illusion that up and comers are entering the industry, the illusion of organic growth. Like pay no attention to like the actual game of the year contenders, Donkey Kong Bonanza, Mario Kart World, Pokemon Legends ZA. Like, let's talk about some double A slop that no one even remembers after release week. Let's talk about a game that was outsold by Pokemon Legends ZA in a week. Expedition 33, Clair Obscure, which is the single worst name for a game I've ever heard in my life, by the way. Like, this is a very clear, transparent example of what the game industry shilling for a product looks like, because it's very interesting kind of seeing how something like Mario and Luigi Brothership, which was a bazillion times the RPG this was, get downplayed and ignored, and then Expedition comes out and people like, oh, this combat system is amazing. It's completely unique and I've never seen anything like it before. And then you look into it and like, yeah, we took influence from Mario and Luigi. Like, again, this is the issue I have with this situation. The simple fact of the matter is the people praising Expedition 33 as game of the year do not have any kind of relationship or understanding of JRPGs at all. And so they are touting this French developed RPG as like some equivalent or even superior to classic Japanese RPGs, when really it can't even compete with the RPGs that are coming out on Nintendo consoles this year. Simply put, if you don't play RPGs, if you don't know anything about them, why exactly would I take you seriously when you say that Expedition 33 is the best? This is a game I know nothing about, a game I haven't seen, a game I haven't talked about much, because I know this is an industry plant that is going to win the Game of the Year award quite handedly. It's going to be praised by Jeff at his shill show, and then it's going to be completely forgotten. It's going to be Astrobot. It's going to be Baldur's Gate 3. It's going to be Elden Dingaling. It's going to be It Takes Two. It's going to be like, The Last of Us Part 2. Like Animal Crossing New Horizons is getting a new update next year. Animal Crossing New Horizons was robbed in 2020. That is the game that everyone remembers from that year. That's the game that everyone thinks back on as like the game that defined, the decade, honestly. Like everyone knows that Animal Crossing New Horizons is this big, huge cultural phenomenon, and the industry tried instead to rally behind The Last of Us Part 2, an extremely controversial, polarizing game that had no momentum behind it. Like a game that is only shilled by man children like Angry Joe, who think that a lesbian not killing some bitch at the end is somehow deep. Like that is the reality of what we're seeing here, is that the people who don't play video games, who don't know anything about them, who couldn't tell you the difference between Tales of Symphonia and Persona 4, they are trying to dictate what is and is not a good RPG. And this is something that JRPG fans absolutely should push back against. The JRPG genre is so full of high quality titles that the idea that Expedition 33 clears them all is just completely laughable. You're telling me it's like better than Tales of Arise, you're telling me it's better than Xenoblade Chronicles 3, you're telling me it's better than Fire Emblem Three Houses or Engage or like, Mario and Luigi Brothership. Like, no, I don't believe that. And like, you can't really convince me otherwise because you don't have the credentials to try and sell me on the idea that some random French studio is able to compete with the all-time greats. And that's kind of my mindset going into this, is that yes, it is going to be win game of the year. But this is such a nothing burger award going to like an industry plant that it's not going to lead to any like big financial like upheaval. Like, people aren't going to stop buying Pokemon because Expedition 33 was handed an award. Astrobot won last year, and what happened? Like, Donkey Kong Bonanza came out not even a full year after and cleared it without even trying. Nobody saw that coming. And yet we were supposed to believe that Astrobot was some 10 out of 10 platformer, the best PlayStation exclusive in years, that this was some like 10 out of 10 thing because like, oh, look at Astrobot. He's wearing a costume and dancing. Like, no, absolutely not. Like, I didn't even like Bonanza that much, and it clears Astrobot. There are dozens of platformers on Nintendo that clear Astrobot without even trying. Okay, like like Mario Galaxy is like almost 20 years old now. That still clears Astrobot. Nobody's gonna remember Astrobot 10 years from now. Who do you know who remembers Astro's Playroom or like the VR game? Nobody. Okay, nobody cares about these Game of the Year winners and these industry plants. Alan Wake 2 was shilled to high heaven, and yet nobody remembers about that game at all. So, like, going into this award season, I predict they are going to give pretty much everything to Expedition 33. They're going to give some pity awards to Silk Song. They're going to like try and shill some of the other like third party games, but like, I think by and large, like, the actual like real awards, including the Game of the Year award, are going to go to Expedition 33. And it really is something that we should condemn as a community. Like, it's definitely like the most transparent example of an industry plant since I think Baldur's Gate 3. Honestly, I would even argue this is like worse than Baldur's Gate 3 because at the very least, like Baldur's Gate has like the Twilight 50 Shades of Grey audience of like, like butterball, like 40-year-old liberal, sexually depraved females. Like, you don't have that with Expedition 33. Like, there's no momentum behind this game at all. Like, at least with Baldur's Gate, you were able to like hype up the sex scenes. Like, oh, he turns into a bear. Oh, like, you were able to like talk about that. But with Expedition 33, you have nothing outside of like some vague assertions that the game and story is very deep. It's just no, like, absolutely not. You're gonna have to do a lot better than that to convince me this game is on par with Final Fantasy VI, which is something that they did try and claim early on. So, like, what can we expect going forward? Like, I think Expedition 33 is gonna win. I think it's gonna be the ones that like the game journals hype up as like this industry defining classic, but I think it's gonna be pretty quickly outstripped in relevancy by Pokemon, by Kirby, by Metroid Prime 4, by like every other Nintendo game that's coming out. Not only this year, but going into next year. Like, Pokemon is a really interesting case because the game or Legend ZA already cleared Expedition 33 in sales, like within a week. And it's also getting DLC next year. And that's kind of why I feel like this entire concept of Game of the Year is outdated, because this is why I think the Game of the Year concept is outdated, because one of the copes for why Splatoon 3 couldn't be considered Game of the Year was that, like, well, it doesn't have enough content. And then, I spent like, people have spent like hundreds of hours playing that game, enjoying all the updates, all the expansion, like everything they did with that amazing game. And like, when it's all said and done, like a couple of years later, it doesn't get nominated again, right? The entire cope of like, well, it didn't have enough content at launch kind of falls apart considering like how that game is structured and how it works. Like oh man, you couldn't get through this game that takes hundreds of hours in like in, in the release window. It's like, yeah, like what do you think was going to happen? So like again, like we've seen this happen a lot with Nintendo games cuz like, like we're still playing Breath of the Wild, we're still playing Tears of the Kingdom, we're still playing Animal Crossing, we're still playing Splatoon 3. Like we're still playing all these like amazing games, okay? They're still getting updated, they're still doing all this stuff. In other words, the average Nintendo game kind of surpasses whatever is granted the Game of the Year award, because something like Luigi's Mansion, something like Pikmin 1, something like Super Smash Bros. Melee, something like Super Mario Sunshine, like Super Mario Galaxy, like Chibi Robo, these games are still played and talked about decades after the fact, all while something like Expedition 33 fades into obscurity. Like Nintendo is bigger than Game of the Year. It's bigger than the Game Awards. And as a result of that, why exactly should we take what a bunch of game journals who don't even play games seriously when it comes to discussing the current state of the video game industry? They don't play everything, they don't know what's coming out, and so they have no idea about all of the numerous RPGs that have come out recently that are better than Expedition 33. Games like the Trails in the Sky remake, games like the Romancing Saga 2 remake, games like Dragon Quest 1 and 2, games like Tales of Xillia. The list goes on and on and on and on and on and on. Like Expedition 33 isn't even on my radar for future RPG releases because I have way too much Kino on the horizon to play on the horizon to ever consider playing some Western slop. This is Baldur's Gate 3 all over again. This is a mediocre release that's being hyped up by a increasingly desperate game journal uh, community to try and authenticate the Western video game industry and to try and get them taken seriously by the Japanese. We can make better JRPGs than you can. Well, no, you can't. That is all that Expedition 33 has proven with this release.